a civil engineer from Pittsfield. I've done a bunch of work in Great Barrington, actually worked on this hotel a couple of times with special permits. So I have a lot of history here in town and in the area, presenting projects and building things and working under the zoning bylaw here in town, working with the boards and with town officials and neighbors. Spent a large part of my career doing this. This case is a little unique. You folks probably know more about this project than I do, which is a unfamiliar position for me. I'm usually the one who knows the most about every project when I'm in a room. You folks have a lot of history here. The proposal here is, as you know, is to do work at the existing Great Barrington Airport, and our project really hasn't changed. Our goal is to build hangars. We've gone through the civil engineering part, which is what I am. I'm a professional engineer, so I've gone through a site plan. We've looked at things like riverfront area. We've looked at things like the overlay district for the aquifer. We've done our due diligence as it relates to the engineering questions. I'm pretty comfortable with those, to be honest with you. You may not be, but as an engineer and a professional, I'm very comfortable. I think as I've read through the file and I read newspaper articles and knowing folks who have worked on this in the past and just talking to them anecdotally, I know that there was a lot of disagreement and a lot of debate. So I can go through our project. I can tell you how great it is and why airports are important. I can tell you that there's a demand and that we won't really increase traffic. I can tell you that there's not an issue as it relates to lead contamination and that we have monitoring wells around our brand new tanks. And I can advocate better than most, I think. I think the bigger question is there a ability for this group to build a relationship with their neighbor and come to some sort of reasonable set of conditions that would allow a project, what I believe to be a modest project, to go forward. I mean, these are low-rise buildings. We have them in a location up against the riverfront, which is 200 feet from the top of bank of the river, where there won't impact views. We can go earth tones with the buildings, so they're not unsightly. We can add landscaping around our perimeter to help screen things. We want to be a good neighbor. We think we can, build a driveway that won't have folks driving across our runway, but will ultimately allow safe access and better parking. So we feel like we've gone through the normal engineering approach, and the only nuance here that I'm uncertain about after doing this, 1,000 times in my career, that may be hyperbole, but it feels like that, is there any chance for a conversation back and forth about conditions? And I think that's where it was left off. If I'm reading things right, maybe I'm crazy, but as I read the newspaper articles and meeting minutes and looked at things, it seems to me that there was really an impasse on how restrictive the conditions had become and how frustrated everyone was, maybe in a room that didn't have an air conditioner that was working. And there was a lot of meetings and tempers flared, and there really was no middle ground found. And I guess the purpose of this meeting is to introduce me to you and to see, from my perspective, to let you know that if there really is a problem with lead in a neighbor's well, we'll look at it. If there is a concern about lead from the tanks and avgas that they're using, there's monitoring wells that are required, that are installed with these new tanks. They're required by state code. I haven't seen them. I'm pretty certain they're there. If they're there, we'll test them. A lead test in water, I don't know, maybe $30. I mean, it's not a $3,000 test. Lead's pretty simple. Lead's a metal. It's not soluble. So it's not going to travel great distances normally. Unless you dump it down a well into the aquifer, you're not going to have a situation where you are having like MTBE used to be with gasoline, where it would have this enormous plume in sandy soils and go great distances. That's not what we're dealing with here. Are there ways to manage an issue, a specific issue like lead? I think there is. If there's an offsite well that's contaminated, I think we could pump test that well and try to figure out what the issue is. If I'm willing to tackle questions and problems, but if the idea is that we just don't like that airport, we wish it would go away, and it's not not in my backyard, but rather let's not build anything anywhere, I can't solve that. There's no engineer in the world that can. So it's really I have a whole presentation prepared, and the more I'm thinking about it driving down here, I'm saying I don't want to waste these people's time. You know, you folks know the project. You know what it looks like.
No, we don't.
You don't? Well, it's the same project that you saw before. It's
I haven't seen it before.
you didn't see it before? Well, this is the airport. There's a little picture here in the corner. You can come up closer if you like, but the runway is generally, you know, east and west. On the north side along the forested area, I think there's an old hangar over there now. The idea would be to construct, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 buildings with an access drive to Seekonk Crossroad that would come in, allow parking without having to cross the paved runway. And you know, we have 54 planes on the ground, and we're trying to create hangars to shelter those planes. That's the plan.
Excuse me, the last plan we saw was for 3 hangars, I believe, never, am I?
This was the original, and then they changed it to 3.
Yeah, this was the original, but through the process, it was 3.
Reduced. So this is well, we're back to the beginning.
So
Okay.
you're expanding from what we
Yeah.
saw before. You might be back to the beginning, but our beginning was a smaller project,
Okay,
okay? So be aware.
thank you. So the idea is, the concept I don't think has changed from everything I've read, was that the goal was to house existing aircraft on the ground.
Well,
Is it limited to existing aircraft?
No,
Okay.
but we're creating parking spaces that are similar to the number of existing aircraft that are on the ground now.
I
So-
think we'd like some history about why there were 6, and then there were 3, and now there are 6. That's one question that pops up in my mind, so I didn't know the history. I came in late,
Okay,
and, but I'm
I-
glad you brought it up, that
I-
it's changed, so this would be helpful to us, as
okay,
in terms of
I'll look into it. I don't
conversation.
know,
There's a few other things that would be helpful to me in terms of conversation. You're saying it doesn't increase traffic. What about the air traffic?
That's what I was, well, I'm suggesting that if we build parking spaces really indoors for 54 planes, that we're not creating space for additional planes.
So the airports, the traffic will not be, the traffic over our homes will not be increasing. The air pollution from the airplanes will not be increasing. One of your pilots at the last round, I know you weren't here, and I know you're getting it, came up at a public meeting and said, if you don't give me these hangars, I'm gonna pollute your neighborhood more, warming up my plane.
That's
It was crazy, he also lost my business, so it's
Okay.
even. So I guess the pollution and the air traffic are my issues.
Okay,
And those are some answers that certainly, from my point of view, I don't think it's amusing. That
who's amused?
I would
Who's
like
amused?
to, I would like to know about.
who's amused?
Well, I'm sorry, never mind.
Okay,
And.
I'm not amused, I just,
Okay, very good. And the other thing is just another thing about community respect. I don't walk past the airport as much as I used to, but I walk pretty much. And I often see on my little walks, more often, the cars speeding down that runway.
okay,
And I turn around, I had the most interesting conversation. Some guy stops, he stops, he's a very pleasant fellow, and I said, you just broke the law. And he looks at me and he says, hey, I'm a veteran. All right, so, this is not really a indication of respect for the neighborhood or respect from anybody but the airport itself. Equally as disturbing is that after it was all over, all sorts of misinformation was being spread in this town. I had people emailing me saying, oh, what did you do? The airport just wanted to open a restaurant. I got that from people. I got that because pilots told friends to tell me. So I think honesty, clarity, and real answers about traffic and disturbance, which right now I don't think the airport has, your answers are not trusted by your neighbors.
okay. I will, I'm not gonna suggest to you that I'm gonna stand here on my feet
No,
and
no,
come
you
up
know, I'm
with
just saying,
answers.
but-
I appreciate the information. I don't know, who are we looking at? Is there someone in particular that I need to?
I'm a former journalist, I scan the room.
Okay, I just, if there's an issue, I'm just trying to uncover issues so that I can provide the information you asked me for, and I'm just trying to understand the
I
context.
gave you this.
Appreciate that.
Could you just give us a general overview
Yeah.
of the project?
So the project is, as I understand it, and folks, please correct me if I'm wrong, we have some folks here with me, but is to build, proposed hangar buildings. They're, approximately 18 feet high. These hangars would be able to house, we have 54 planes on the ground as of like today. So if the idea is to build shelters for those aircraft. That's really the project.
Would that eliminate the tie-down planes?
Just eliminate those parking spaces, that's not something we've talked about. I can get you an answer on that.
So.
Potentially, you're suggesting we could have 108. I hear what you're saying. So I'll.
I'm just asking for density.
I mean, if somebody landed at it's a public airfield, so if someone wanted to land and park, it's difficult to prohibit that. I mean, I don't know how you would, I've flown a private plane. I don't know how, if I called in and said I wanted to pull in and buy gas, I don't know how they would decline my.
That's not a tie down, that's just someone coming in and out.
Okay.
So that's not.
Okay, thank you.
So
So,
the tie-downs would still be there plus the hangar.
yeah, again,
There's
the purpose of me standing here is to understand what the problems are, and I apologize for being behind. I'm trying to catch up, but also.
I'm behind too, cause
So-
I just moved into the neighborhood.
Okay, and then, I mean, if whatever the issues are, if we can make a list of those issues and work on them cooperatively, maybe that's not possible. But if it is possible, then I think the project's has merit. So I'm just trying,
Here, taking down notes?
I'm sorry? Yeah,
Was
yeah.
Brad here taking notes?
Yeah, Sarah is helping me, an engineer in my office,
Well,
absolutely.
I have a basic question, because you're saying there was a flyer, almost none of the neighbors got one. Who did you invite to this meeting?
All neighbors within 500 feet of the subject property.
You
So
think
all
that's the
neighbors.
limit of the influence of the airport on the neighborhood?
No, but in a special permit application requirement, neighbors within 300 feet are required to be notified, so we
you're
extended it to
following the
500
minimum-
feet.
You're following the minimum
Exceeding
legal
the
procedure.
I'm exceeding the minimum, the minimum is 300, we went 500, and then that would
That's
cover
very
everybody
generous of you, I
who would
must
be
say.
interested, and then if you invited your neighbor saying, hey, if
Well,
you've been
we're
involved
lucky
in the
we found
project.
out about it.
So, it's.
So if there are problems, why didn't you invite the neighborhood who have been coming to the meetings? I mean, how many people here got a flyer? Okay, so 4 people.
Well, I absolutely abut the
Right, you're in
airport.
the
I'm
backyard.
practically in it, so.
So then to say, well, what are the problems, I think it starts with I think it's quite true, there hasn't been a lot of respect for the neighborhood, and to get stuck on lead fuel, I mean, all the stuff used for maintenance, the oil, the paints, the lubricants, they're all pollutants. If there's a problem, you got PFAS. Where's this stuff going? These didn't have a septic system, so it means it's all being washed down and flushed into the aquifer.
Okay.
That's a big problem,
Well, excuse
and
me,
that's a
but
problem
there's
for the
There's a
town.
big leap between it's being used on site and it's flushed into the aquifer. I'm willing to look at it for you. I'm not willing to concede that
No,
if
we're
we
not
use
asking
it,
you
it's
to
in the
concede that.
aquifer.
But that
I'm
was
not gonna
one
go
of-
there with you.
That was one of the
Okay,
problems,
okay.
because there is no septic system in these, is there? Have you put a septic system in
the hangars?
to service the hangars?
No, honestly, a septic system would be the absolute worst thing to do. I wouldn't
Well,
wanna
okay.
introduce a pathway for contaminants to get to the groundwater. So
Okay.
I would never propose that for what you're suggesting.
All right, but
But-
you have no toxic waste removal permit.
Okay, so
So where does all this toxic waste go?
okay, I'll find out. I'll find out.
We have never been able to get that
There's the
answer.
Resource Conservation Recovery Act, there's a federal law that.
There's a lot of
there's a
stuff,
lot
but
of
it doesn't mean.
No, I'm just saying, so they're probably a very small quantity generator under that, they probably have filings, I'll look at it, I'll look at
Okay,
it.
and are there still office spaces in each one of these? Because they were so big, there were office spaces, but there were no toilets in them. So where were people gonna go to the
Is there
bathroom?
office spaces in the hangars?
There's at each end, because of the way that the hangars are shaped, there's like a, area, storage for maintenance equipment and stuff like that.
They
Well,
were,
there was
they were-
space that was specifically described as usable and probably gonna be used.
And rentable.
Wasn't- I don't think it was proposed to be built out at.
Mike's our architect, and he's telling me there's no offices on our plan right now, so
What's
that's
an
what I'm gonna.
office? It's a
Well,
doorway.
they're
Wait,
open
wait.
spaces with no airplanes in them, so they could be they could be anything.
Well, I
But-
think,
So
you
the
know,
question is, will you commit legally
Yeah,
not to put
not
offices?
to put offices,
in
or
those?
maybe,
rentable
I don't know.
All right, well, that's a question.
office
Okay,
space.
fair enough. No, again, that's what I'm trying to get to, because if
Yeah.
there's a list, and that's on the list, and we can agree to it, then I think we want to. I guess it's just a case of what's on the
Well,
list.
No, we're not supposed to create the list. You're supposed to give us guarantees that these are not going to impact our water, our wells, the Green River, that they're not gonna, create enormous amounts of traffic in a residential neighborhood, you
And
know?
noise.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is you're talking about taking a residential road and putting a commercial driveway on it. That's an issue for everybody, especially the Steiner School.
Okay.
There's a lot of traffic that goes to the Steiner School. Now you're talking about people coming in and out.
I'll do a traffic evaluation on how many trips a day this type of use generates, and I'll give you an opinion on it. That's the best I can do.
In a residential neighborhood.
Well, it doesn't, from my perspective, it doesn't matter if it's on the moon. It's, the trip generation will be the same based on the use.
But
So that's how we
also,
do it. Yep.
people come and go all hours of the day to this airport.
Now,
There
the
are
airport
no
generally
restrictions.
has hours. I mean, they're, whatever, 8 to 5, or, they have hours. If folks come in off hours, you're absolutely right. I mean, if someone lands at 11 at night,
Well,
there's
it's
gonna
not-
be a car.
Not just landing. There are kids in the neighborhood, there are people driving on the runway, there are people with ATVs there.
Okay, so Sarah,
There,
right
there
down
are a lot of
security.
people, and
Security
so,
is an issue.
what, I guess ultimately, if security is an issue, then do we get into, we're living with big fences and things, and, again? It all goes
here's
like
the
this,
thing.
we don't get a basic answer on something, then it goes to something else and something else, so you can't say, I mean, it's
okay,
really
so-
up to you guys to tell us exactly what you're doing, and when we have questions about what you're doing, cause this is not the plan that went to town.
Yeah, it would be
This is not the
helpful
plan that went to town.
if.
I didn't try to draw the plan that went to town, so I'm not
Well,
not
but you're
feeling.
saying-
Okay, but
it's
you're
the
the
same
expert now.
project.
You're
I am.
presenting.
I-
You
I'm-
now represent the group of owners.
Okay.
So honestly, I say this,
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't mean to be mean,
No, go
but
ahead.
it's your job to come up with a list of issues that should concern or may concern the neighbors.
So here's-
But not come in with a plan
Well-
that you tell us is the old plan when it wasn't. So-
Okay, well, it is the old plan. I guess we're at different levels. I'm at 40,000
Okay, well,
feet,
you
and you're
should-
at 10,000
you
feet.
should do a little more
So it's
homework.
apples and oranges.
You should
Before
do
I
a
do
little more
homework,
homework.
well, understand the purpose of me being here. So let's agree to at least understand and listen for a second on why I'm here. I'm here to try to understand. I know there's a lot of history. I'm trying to be respectful of your frustration level as it sits, and I'm trying to draw a plan in pencil before I come in here and be presumptuous and do a ton of work and say, this is the plan, and then have you folks hate it for 10 reasons. Now, I draw plans that meet the regulations. Things that you're asking me for aren't part of that.
Well,
So,
part of what
so
you're hearing-
for me to suggest to you that I'm gonna do things that are outside of the game here, okay, we're playing football, and you're asking me to do something that's not part of football, which is fine. I'm happy to do that, but
Okay, well, part of-
general security in kids is not something I normally
Okay, there's a
hear
lot
about.
of-
So I'm
there's
just
a
trying to
lot of
learn
that
from you.
here. And I know that's outside the purview of your engineers, but it's a lot of stuff that's very important to the neighbors, including things like the people, flying their airplanes and not using the required FAA flight plans.
Okay.
Coming too close, frequently flying over areas that they're not supposed to fly over, flying too close, people using the grass runway, which ends, at us, where, on Seacon Crossroad, where there are power lines right across the street, to, flying over there. There are lots of things. We've never been able to get straight on what the permitting is for the existing buildings.
Okay.
What are the plans
The
there?
permitting for the existing buildings, what are we talking about there? Could you be more specific?
The headquarters building.
Right,
They
so
said
you're-
It's gonna be a restaurant, they're gonna do this.
So
they're gonna do
uses in
entertainment.
that building to start with.
Uses, and how's their septic system? It's on an aquifer, does it meet code? Now, I know this isn't the hangars, but if you wanna know
It's
what's
part of the
going on,
hangars.
and the concerns in the neighborhood, it's all a big package.
Okay,
So there are a lot
Okay.
of these other issues that if you really want to get cooperation and understanding, also have to be
Should I write
addressed.
down Title V on the existing septic? Okay, thank you. This time in the back's been waiting patiently, can I jump in, sir?
I think there might be like a little bit of confusion, because from my understanding, the hangars are to store airplanes. They're not working on them, so there's not extra oil and pollutants and whatever inside them, which is gonna be washing into the
We're going to be
aquifer.
working on them in there.
So I think that that's one thing. And another thing is that I understand everybody's concerned here, but we should try to concentrate on what you're presenting instead of if the building has a proper septic, which happens to be brand new, but that's beside the point. We should try to concentrate on
So
what you're
you
trying to
came in a
present.
couple minutes late, and just in everyone's defense, I asked them for this.
Yeah.
Okay, I introduced myself and I said, let me have it, folks, and I asked them. So we're gonna let them run, because I think this is the way I need to understand this project.
No,
I'm
but I
coming.
think we'd like to hear exactly what your project is, including how many airplanes and how much storage space, and,
Okay,
because this is
I
not the
don't- I-
project that came to town.
Okay.
And
the-
where is it located, please?
The existing aircraft stored in hangars is 24. The existing aircraft stored on the grass is 28. The proposed additional hangar space was 34, 30 single engine, 6,000 pound aircraft, 4 turboprop, 12,000 pound. There's a total of 54 aircraft tied down today, and this will provide as much as 54 in-shelter aircraft spaces. Airplane traffic. The airport does not expect any noticeable increase in airplane traffic. Most of the new hangar spaces will be rented to existing customers who already have planes stored on the grass or in existing community hangars. The new hangar spaces will be rented to customers who likely already fly to the Berkshires but will not park their aircraft here because there are no available indoor storage options. That's generally the plan. What we did is we suggested, the things that we knew about were really a few things. One was views and location of the hangars, the size of the hangars, and to look at that, we have an 18-foot tall, it's basically a single-story type building. It's a low-rise building. What we've done is we've shifted it to the northern side. I don't know, this may have been part of the previous plan, but at least in our planning, we've made a point, so it's north of the runway. It's right up against these lines. Our riverfront lines, they're 200 feet from the mean annual high water, so we went out and identified the top of bank under the Wetlands Protection Act. We have determined where the limit of the regulated riverfront is, which tells us where we can build and where we can't.
Where's the Green River on that map?
It's this blue up to top,
Okay.
okay? So we're 200 feet away from it, and with the limit of our work, the site's very flat, so there's not a lot of earthwork that needs to be done as far as grading hillsides or leveling. So we'll have basically a gravel driveway that would come in that has parking for 6 parking spaces in front of these 5 hangars, 4 parking spaces for the smaller hangar. The hangars, the larger ones are 147 by 50, the smaller one is 125 by 60. The idea is to pave around the hangars, and we looked at this impervious area as it relates to the aquifer, at least under the regulations. And because of the overall size of the property and the percentage of impervious area on the property, no filing is required with respect to the overlay district. So there's no requirement from the town to have infiltration, which is typically the requirement when I've done other projects like a Guido's in town or some other project in town that I've done that has a big parking lot. We typically will have infiltration under the parking lot. In this case, that's not proposed. We've met with the town planner, and he agrees based on our math that it's not applicable. So what we've done is now we have this thing up to the north. What we looked at is view sheds primarily along the traveled way. So if you look at that, you're driving by the airport and you can parallel to the runway, and you're looking northeast, you can see the mountains. This is kind of tucked up against the forested edge. Now, our folks living to the west potentially could see from the side, could see across this edge. I can't make it invisible, so we've tried to be thoughtful about its location on the site.
Are they located where the clamshell and
May I
the
approach?
other hangar, are they over there now instead of smacking them down?
Yes. We're actually,
In the top corner, I'm
The
sorry.
clamshell will be removed.
They're up here in the corner. See, this is the runway, yeah, go ahead. I'll walk around everyone, I'm not trying to.
So there's no cafe?
I don't have any information on a cafe. Does anybody have any information?
Is there any improvement to the existing building?
I'm proposing no improvements to the existing
Well,
building.
this is a little grandiose, you know, this is only a small airport. Before, you had 3 hangars for
That's right.
18 planes.
That's right.
You tell me that many people are gonna pay, hangar fees? I'd rather doubt it. This is rather, this is not Bradley International, it's just a local airport, small airport.
I,
You have 24 planes now there, how many?
there's 54 on the ground tied down today, according to the airport manager.
So that's the number of.
No, that's on the airport
That's
total.
encompassing everything.
That's everything. So am I saying that right?
Yes. That,
Well, some of them parked inside the existing area.
Explain it for me, Joe. Tell,
can I see the numbers you got on there?
Here, I have it right
You
here.
have it right
I can do it for you if you're ready.
go ahead.
So currently there are 24 existing, sorry, Mike Valenti, owner's rep. Existing aircraft stored in hangars is 24. Existing on the grass now is 28. And we're proposing 34 total new hangar spaces. So we're removing the clamshell hangar, and installing 34 hangars. So that will fit a total of 30 single engine aircraft under 6,000 pounds. An additional 4 turboprop airplane, which is a little larger plane. It's 12,000 pounds. Right now, we have 28 customers that are currently requesting to be stored in these new hangars. So they're already on the ground or in a different hangar and want to move into one of these hangars. That leaves 6 left at the moment to be rented to someone else. And I mean, this is very, early
So
in
we'd
the-
have 6 vacancies based on this plan,
based on the plan today.
with
yes.
6 buildings.
Yes.
Is that clear?
No, I don't get it.
So, okay,
Oh.
how you go?
I don't understand. I thought you said that the 6 hangars were for 54 planes.
No, that was incorrect. It's 34 hangars. There are 34 spaces.
So each hangar holds 5 planes.
So see the 5 ones that are spread out like fingers on the top? There's 6 in each of those, and those are the smaller ones. And then the one hangar toward the bottom left there, that'll fit 4 of the larger ones, the 12,000 pounds.
So you have hangar space for 34.
34.
Okay, so Joe said 54. Why 54?
That 54 is that's all the airplanes based on the field right now
Okay.
that are sitting there.
But
Some of them are already indoors.
Yes. What's the 20?
There's 24 indoors.
Yes.
Okay.
Indoors right now in our community hangars, our main shop, and that'll be it. That's it.
Jonathan, go ahead.
So Jude, in terms of safety and protecting the water quality, I assume the hangars are gonna have a concrete floor.
Yes.
So which is safer, to have a plane indoors stored on a concrete floor, or having it tied down on grass?
It's obviously better inside the building, of
Is
course.
that what?
It's obviously safer inside the building.
Okay. And will there be, when this was talked about before, there was gonna be a ban on doing any sort of maintenance work in any of the new hangars, that was just storage?
I think that'd be a reasonable accommodation. Absolutely. I mean, I don't want to speak for the team. I don't know them well enough. I've just been hired.
Well, that's a question.
Yeah, I'm learning, but I can tell you this, that I've gone and gotten my private license. I mean, I didn't finish the test, I took the practical. So, I'm not a pilot, but I've flown, I've soloed, I've been around the airport, I got half a clue. And maintaining an aircraft is completely different than parking an aircraft, and folks don't maintain their own aircrafts in my world. So I would think that would be a reasonable accommodation. And if not, we would, honestly, if it wasn't, then under the code, we'd have to have a floor drain. And if we had a floor drain, we wouldn't put it to a septic system, we'd put it to a tight tank, we'd have an oil water separator. It'd be a different conversation that I haven't heard a reason to have yet. If we have to have that conversation, then I'll dig deeper. But that's what I'm trying to get to is defining this project. And if we can all do it together, you don't have to participate. You're absolutely right. It's my job to define this project and come to you with it. If that's what I have to do, it's just much harder to completely design it and then come to you and have you dislike things and then go back and redesign it, and it just becomes crazy process. If I can just I'm wasting your time a little bit, but you're also, I think in the end, it saves time because we ultimately can work together and get closer quicker.
Right, but you didn't make this a public meeting. I mean, there were 4 people in this room who got notices.
Right.
So if you really are concerned about finding out what the issues were, there are a lot of people in the neighborhood who are in the flight path,
Okay.
whose houses are affected, who live downriver of this, who, you know, are concerned about the water, and they weren't included in this meeting. And I don't think that's appropriate then to ask the few people who are here to tell you how to do this project. But also, it is really a problem to say that this is the same project. This is not what was presented to the
Okay,
town.
I won't
So
say
this is
that
a
again.
whole new
I
project.
stand corrected on the.
What's
It's-
your view of the permitting process
18
going forward?
18 planes.
Look.
And we had the town meeting, it was, for eight,
So this project is, there has been no application made. We're here talking about, a project that we're contemplating. So it's a new project.
a year ago, it was 18.
I'll get to you, sir.
3 acres, 18 planes.
That's not what we're proposing.
Yeah, but what
What's
are you
changed?
proposing in regard to the airport? I know Rick Solon was an airplane pilot. But, with this level of activity for a local airport, this is not a local airport. He's starting a charter service, an Amazon flight, service or what?
No.
Well,
We're
but
telling you, we have
need
to.
to read your own website, which said that they were gonna start fly-in maintenance, and they were gonna have all, you know, a great
Well, they're
place to
running,
come with your
a small
family.
business. I'm not here to shut their business down. I'm telling you that I wanna build parking in 6 buildings on the airport.
No, but that's not part of their business now, so, you know, when you add this much building, it would seem that you gotta find a way to pay for it. You know, that you gotta put them up, I mean, how?
The business plan that I'm aware of, again, the business plan that I'm aware of that has been shared with my office is that we're building structures to house airplanes, to park them. That's what we're building. Go ahead, sir.
So 2 questions. What's the approximate budget for this project? Just order of magnitude.
How many square feet of building do we have?
So you got, it's like 75, 15.
I don't know, is the answer. I mean, I can throw you a wild
It's gonna be
guess.
about, it's close, just over 40,000 square feet.
$50 a square foot, something
Yeah,
like
if
that?
yeah.
Maybe $40 a square foot.
$40 a square foot, 40,000 square feet. That
Like
includes
50, probably
the
$2 million,
pads and
$2 million
all the
project.
related all the related grading and site work.
Yeah, they're prefabricated metal.
The buildings are actually inexpensive, the
Yeah.
floors, the foundations, the paving.
Sprinkler?
I'm not sure these
They're
buildings,
not required to be sprinkled.
yeah, I'm not sure they need
They
that.
were last time around.
They're all under 7,500 square feet, and they're all considered Group 3 hangars by the FAA and don't require sprinkling.
So you don't have to take the gas out of the plane to put it in there?
No. It's the lowest level hangar that's designated by the
The
FAA.
gas in the plane probably means that it needs to be ventilated under the code. I mean, there's some, air, light, ventilation.
It'll fall under the requirements for like a parking garage or and other fuel storage.
Are these smaller hangars, smaller footprints than the last plan?
I don't think so. It's the same plane, so.
That was one of the snags last time.
So with the dimensions you gave us, it's 51,600 square feet of building alone.
Fair enough.
Well, I mean,
Trying to
that's
give
the kind of thing, like, why are we having to figure that out? That should be.
You don't have to figure it out. You can ask me the question and be patient, and I'll come back with the answer. You want an off the top of my head answer? I'm trying to give it to you.
That's part
Well,
of the
that's a
plan.
very basic part of the
No, it's
plan,
not.
is how much square footage it's gonna take up.
It's 45,000.
Okay.
Okay,
Well,
so
then
the
those
second-
dimensions
The
are
second part of the
correct.
question,
Yeah.
assuming this
There-
goes forward.
Yep.
What is the permitting process, as you see it? What boards you have to go to?
Yeah, there's two possibilities as I read the zoning. There's one under, that could be a special permit for the airfield if we ask for that, which I think is what happened last time. I don't really know, I wasn't there, but, it's a process through the select board, which is, I'm pretty certain is what happened. If that permit were granted, then these buildings are actually considered accessory and are allowed by right. So if you get a special permit for an airfield at this location, then a lot of these activities just become allowed. Because it's a pre-existing non-conforming use, and do folks, I assume you understand what that means already, I don't
Well,
have to.
that hasn't been established.
It has,
Assuming
it has.
it is.
It's, we're pretty certain it is, our lawyers are pretty certain, so we'll just agree to disagree on that. Go ahead, ma'am, do you know?
But if it is, then what?
And so the second option is to go to the zoning board of appeals for an expansion of a pre-existing non-conforming use. So we have two possible special permits. We've discussed it, we're not really certain which way we wanna go yet. We wanna talk to the owner a little bit in more detail about it, the legal team and myself. Go ahead, ma'am.
I just have an observation, because I live abutting the airport, for, I think, probably close to about 12 years. What I've noticed is that the planes have gotten larger that are coming in and out of the airport. And I assume it's because they now make planes that can land on a shorter runway.
Probably.
So now there are big, when we first came, little small planes. Now, I've seen some very large planes in addition to some very large helicopters. And it's just gotten noisier, and this looks to me like just a huge expansion of what was a little airport that people ran. Why did they need it? Is it that they want to make a lot of money? That seems like,
Well,
who's paying for all
You're
this?
asking me my opinion now. I mean, I can give you my personal, my professional opinion. There's nothing really to do with this. I can just tell you in airports in general. So, because I don't want to pin this applicant down to my opinion.
Okay.
But I mean, the transportation system in Berkshire County has a growth rate. I mean, if you look at highways as a very similar example, the growth rate in a project I'm looking at in Lenox is 1% per year. Traffic has, since 2004, the traffic in this particular location has gone from approximately 8,000 trips a day to over almost 12,000, like 11,500 trips a day. So there's, you get 1% per year and it compounds. And what happens is, and that happens in air traffic as well, is it's all transportation. So as time passes, there's a inflation rate and it grows, just like I don't know, I don't want to make silly comparisons, but it's like our mortgage or any other dollar or any other thing. It's growing, and the use of this airport is no exception. Okay, there's probably a growth rate. I don't know what it is for airfields. I would suggest it's much lower than it is because much less people fly than drive. But I think you have but it is a percentage. So if you said it was 1%, that's not a giant number, maybe 0.5% per year. But this thing's been around for, we're talking 90 years.
Yeah,
I
but
mean, it's been around a long time.
It's only a certain area.
Well, I think that's where I feel, again, now I'm just talking, and that's where I feel like this is already a restricted use. Meaning this airfield's not growing. So there's a limitation to what planes can land on this airfield without it. I mean, Pittsfield went through a bunch of time, effort, and money to make their airport bigger and longer in a certain direction with the wind to accommodate larger aircraft. That's not what we're talking about here. I think if I live near it and somebody wanted to, you don't have to keep your hand up. I know I'm sorry about that. That's where the neighborhood, I think, would be have a very strong position. I would honestly be sitting on the other side of this conversation if we were talking about making this airfield a half a mile longer or some crazy thing where you wanted to land jets or something here. I get that. Talking some of these issues, I feel like these issues that I'm hearing, so the issue is scale, right? This is big for this airport. That's what you folks are telling me. You're telling me that we don't want a lot more traffic. We have enough. You're telling me that you're concerned about the environment, right? Okay. All those things we live in Massachusetts. This isn't Texas, and no offense to anyone who comes from Texas, but the rules there are different. And we are extremely regulated. There's layer after layer of regulation here. And to suggest that we don't have adequate regulation on handling of materials. Now, could these guys do better housekeeping? Maybe. I've seen.
That's the question.
Yeah, I do 21Es.
The regulations are
I do
pretty good.
reports for the banks, the environmental site assessments, and I go to, the garage in town, and sometimes guys need a little kick to do it better, and I'm willing to do that for this group, and I'm, and put in, I know how to do that. If that's the question, I can solve it. If there's, other things, the scale of this, what happens is to make a project work when there's demand, you wouldn't, first of all, the guys who own the airport, guys or ladies, sorry, but the folks that own the airport aren't gonna build more than they need. They can't afford it. So that there's obviously a demand, or this plan wouldn't even have been drawn. So we have the demand, we have a need for the hangar space. So now it's just a discussion about the traffic and how it relates to the parking spaces. I'll get that. As a civil engineer, I haven't done enough airfield work to tell you, I know for a fact, based on this type of project, it will not increase air traffic. I will find out. That's the best I can tell you. I'm gonna tell you the truth, whether, either way, and in this case, I don't have that answer, but I'll get it. I'll work on it. Sir, one second, sir. Let's jump in.
Sorry, I came late, so just in case anyone already asked the question, I was just curious, one was about lighting. Do you know
the way
what kind
the
of lighting there's gonna be?
Is set up is it would be all LED lighting, and we can talk about the exact colors. They make different colors of
I'm
LED
just
lighting.
Curious, is it like floodlights? Is it gonna
It's
be
motion.
higher?
It'll be downcast lighting. It'll be motion sensor activated, and it can also be on a timer.
How many lights per hangar do you think there'll be?
That I don't know.
Will you have lighting around the perimeter?
I think the plan right now is only just provide enough lighting that if someone were to land and need to get to their hangar, that they would provide enough for that.
So there'll be plumbing, water for each
No.
hangar?
No.
So what will you do for washing of planes and things? You're not gonna do it over there?
No.
No. So there's no heat in the hangars?
No.
So they're not gonna be heated. Will there be any storage space or office space
There will
besides?
potentially be some storage space. We've talked about office, and I think that, I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but I think the conversation was, would we be willing to restrict office use? And I think we would be willing to have that conversation, is where I
I'm
left
sorry, I can't see from here. So is the access road for vehicles along the tree line going from
Yes,
Seatown Cross
yes,
Road?
it is.
And that's gonna be a paved road with parking spots?
It's shown here as gravel with parking spots.
Right. So are you guys also gonna pave the taxiway, or is that
Yes,
gonna
it's
stay?
paved.
Well, it's gonna be paved.
P-
Right now,
the-
it's
the
lo-
gr-
it's grass.
Not the taxiway.
Just this out to the runway.
All right.
The taxiway's gonna remain gravel.
Grass.
Oh, this way? This one here, you mean?
So you're gonna build a road from Seacon Cross going all the way over there through the farm area?
Yes.
So isn't that gonna be a violation of the tax abatements they're getting for that farmland?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Because as far as I know, it was, they were getting,
61A?
right, 61A
Okay.
land.
I'll find out.
Yeah,
We've
just-
discussed that. We're reviewing that.
So will they be applying for grants to construct these hangars?
I think that's a possibility. I don't know.
We'd like to know, because basically as taxpayers, we just paid for this expansion in Pittsfield where they put in safety measures and longer runways and lots of hangars. And if they go and they ask the DOT for money, that comes out of our pockets too. And it doesn't seem appropriate, because even though you may have a right to land there, this is being run as a private business. It's
Okay.
not a government, this is not a government airport. So we then ultimately, it's the neighborhood that pays the price several times over if in fact you go and get grants to do this. It seems, we already have a really safe airport that by air is a minimal amount of time away, maybe 10 minutes away from these people. And we know this is a hobby airport, and they're looking to really expand in a way that's, it's a residential neighborhood, it's not zoned commercial.
No,
So
but the use is allowed in a residential neighborhood in this
it
town.
was a flight school.
I'm just
That's how it
suggesting
got
that
in the
airfields
neighborhood.
are allowed in an R4 zone, as I understand it.
It's
That's
R2.
what I-
Not without a special
This-
permit.
Right,
This is-
right, by special permit. So it's an allowed use with an exception. Yeah.
You wouldn't be able to cite it there today.
Well, there's a lot of things we couldn't do today.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know how relevant that is to me. I mean, as a developer and civil engineer, things my father did, we joke about. I mean, we
Yeah.
could never do.
Okay, but it's
So,
It's not just something that the people who wrote the current R2 zoning regulations said, okay, you wanna plonk
But
one,
it's a bit-
we
I-
feel good about it.
right, but I've run into many instances where I run into uses that are pre-existing,
Sure.
non-conforming, where the use is not even allowed. Okay,
I
so,
get it.
and I'm not feeling that level of distaste for this use because it is contemplated that it could be in this zone. That's all. So I guess that's just my perspective.
I understand.
I'm just not understanding how we could go from the distress that everybody felt when you first applied for this permit. There was so much high feeling and anger and mistrust, which had been which had been rejiggered to create less of an impact on the view shed and to create less of an impact of permeable surfaces, and have only 3 hangars, to now, several years later, come back with this double the size plan when all of the issues, it's not just the hangars we're talking about, it's the trust between the neighbors and the airport. And since then, we've had noise problems, we've had the space used as an event space, we've had issues with safety, we've had planes that appear to be buzzing neighborhood houses, and we've had no communication whatsoever, and no attempt to try to solve these problems before you come back and say, this is what we're gonna build. I'm not really actually talking to you, I'm talking to you. And it's stunning to me, because I thought that there were some of the problems that we have had could be worked out, and could be, as you suggested, discussed. But now it feels like it's flat in our faces. You keep using the tense, we are going to, I mean, you keep using the phrase, we're going to build this.
It might be a
But
bad habit. So
that is a habit, because you do need permission from either one of these two groups.
Absolutely.
And when it is brought to them, then all of this neighborhood character that comes into play when you get a special permit, et cetera, well, all of these issues will still be here. All of the safety, the water, the whatever. The even things like the 61A, which clearly is not accurate. We've asked for a survey, we've asked for a hydrologist report, we've asked for a number of things. We've even suggested, we've talked among ourselves and talked about, couldn't a berm be built that would help muffle the sound at where the runway meets Seacon Crossroad? It would also help block the tremendous amount of snow that gets blown into that road and makes it very unsafe in the winter at times. I know that the snow is pushed back, but before that happens, I mean, there could be snow fences, there could be a berm, there's so many things that would make us feel like there was attention being paid to these kinds of things. Right now, it still feels like the airport is on the edge of town, it's a little bit lawless, it's private, we have no access to any of the public record, any of the records about finances, and even the application for, to the MassDOT was withheld from us by MassDOT. It just doesn't feel like anything's changed. And I'm very, I'm upset about it, because I think a lot of people in this town, not everyone, and certainly there are certain environmental issues here at play, but many people in this town would like to see the airport continue. And now I'm feeling like it's a showdown. With 6 hangars, it's a showdown.
Okay. I hear you loud and clear. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you know, when they had 9/11 2001, the FAA said they had to put up cyclone fences, barbed wire, and all that. And Walt Colassa at that time said to go fly a kite. It's a small local airport, and it's not required.
Okay.
Now, you know, you seem to be keeping up with the Joneses. You had expansion in Pittsfield, you had expansion in North Adams. What comes next? You know, taking land by eminent domain?
I feel like that's I don't know, I'm not sure that's a fair characterization of what they're proposing. I mean, we're not increasing the runway, which is, I think is a very different conversation. And it would be an extremely different impact. It would clearly increase traffic, the size of traffic, noise, all that stuff would be a completely different conversation. By keeping this runway just the way it is, and just really creating some storage space on that facility, I feel is a much different topic and conversation than what happened in Pittsfield. I mean, I fish at Wild Acres. You go to Wild Acres now, compared to what I did when I was a kid, it's a very different place. The runway's 20 feet higher than the dam there now, and it's just different. This is not that. So I don't think that, I just don't want to be thrown into that kettle. I'm willing to, bend over backwards here and try to make this work. I'm not sure I can do it. I'm sorry I didn't invite more people. I just, this is our first pass at it. I'm willing to have another one of these meetings. I'm willing to invite more people. I'm willing to listen. But that's the best we can do, and if maybe this project doesn't come to fruition, so I'm not being presumptuous here. It seems to me that, I do a lot of projects. I've worked for transfer stations, and I've done a bunch of Dunkin' Donuts and retail stores, and I'm not proud of all those projects. This seems like a more of a family business, a viable asset to the community, and I think this project has merit. So that's just my take. Okay, you don't have to agree with me, but it'd be nice if we could figure something out. So that's why I'm standing here. Yes, ma'am.
I live on Seacon Cross Road, and I'm just worried about the access to the airport now being off of Seacon Cross.
Yeah, so the straight answer there is, I would look at the number of cars per day on Seekonk, and my wild guess standing here would be it's a very low volume road, less than probably.
Except when Steiner blows up the road.
Yeah, twice a day.
Right, but how many trips is that? A couple hundred trips? A couple hundred trips from a traffic engineer standpoint doesn't even move the needle. So the problem with traffic, and I'm not here to debate it with you, I'm just telling you, that the problem with traffic is that what traffic engineers use for benchmarks in traffic drive neighbors crazy. So the fact is a project like this may add 40, 50 trips, which is, 5 single-family homes. That's what this would probably generate. I'll look it up, and I'm guessing. So please, I know you're videotaping me. Just don't send me to the border registration. I'm just trying to have a conversation. So this is a very low volume generator. This isn't a drive-through window on some store or a Cumberland Farms, that generates 3,000 trips a day. That's not what we're talking about. 50 trips a day, though, may feel like a lot of trips on that road because that road doesn't have a lot of background traffic. So the disconnect here, just to be frank with you up front, is that if I do a traffic study on this thing, it's going to say there's no impact. And why will it say that? Because from a traffic engineer's standpoint, that road has a capacity of maybe 400 trips a day, 500 trips a day, and you're probably at 300, and it feels like a lot. So I think, I'll do the math just to have the conversation, but ultimately, this will change traffic on that road, okay? Maybe by 10%. That's probably what you're gonna feel, okay? That's the answer. I'm happy to go through and give you specifics and do the work. I'm just spitballing here, but generally that's what happens. Okay, folks are saying, geez, that engineer sounded like he was telling us the truth, and he said there wasn't going to be a lot. Well, from an Institute of Transportation Engineers that looks at federal highways, this project isn't generating any traffic.
But this isn't the highway.
I know, but that's the standard. So there isn't a standard for this use because it's so small, I guess is what I'm trying to explain to you. It doesn't register, in the scheme of engineering. The road can handle it. So it's not about the road anymore. It's about the perception of the folks who live on the road, who are on this sleepy rural road, and so we need to talk about it. That's all.
This is not a job for an engineer.
Okay.
So, Jim,
Why did
you
they
could,
even?
excuse me, I'm talking.
I'm sorry. Excuse me. I'm sorry.
You could do the neighborhood a favor if the airport went to the landowner on the corner of Seekonk and Route 71 and got them to trim their bushes because the sightlines looking west are terrible there.
Okay.
Could you pinpoint where the entrance from Seacon Cross Road is? I can't see.
I don't know if I have a map of
It's
that.
true.
Do I, Sarah?
Kind of up in the
I
corner,
know,
but
but it's kind of crazy.
Which corner?
more of a
Relatively
concept.
speaking.
Is it further from Route 71 or closer?
It's right here. It's way up here.
Oh, so that's changed too, because the original plan had the hangars here and the road there.
We tried to tuck it over on the corner that we.
So you have now an entrance to a commercial airport right opposite my house. I guess that might have an impact on my feeling.
Okay, fair enough. And that's something I'd want to, honestly, that's something where I'd want to put a stake in the ground with a flag on it and have everybody look at it and tell me where they want it, because as far as I'm concerned, moving that, the issue there from, again,
It's proximity to the runway, isn't it? You can't be that close to the runway?
That's a low profile. I don't think that's necessarily an issue. I think it's more about headlights, to be honest with you. I don't want to be shining headlights in anyone's house. So I think the issue there is, you know, we drew a line of convenience on this sketch, but that would be something we should look at, for sure. But that's generally what we're talking about, is
Just
along this
radicalized me.
crossroad.
Well, that was a big mistake.
Yeah.
You know, there's no mistakes at the pencil stage, you know what I mean? This plan's in pencil, it's gonna change 5 times before we get anywhere, so, you know, bear with me,
I
please.
just have I hope it's a little question. There was something you read on that paper, and I didn't get it quite right. It was about something about attracting people who fly here but don't rent here or don't fly here. I mean, what's the
The
intention?
new hangar space will be rented to customers who likely already fly to the Berkshires but will not park their aircraft here because there are no available indoor storage options.
So fly to the Berkshires but don't park here. So there'll be new clients.
Sure, it's, yeah.
Okay, I just want to get your words, and wait a second, a few more questions.
I think there's a, you don't have to catch me in a gotcha of
No,
what
I'm
I'm
not
saying.
getting. I'm trying to understand.
I'm trying to also, and I think ultimately what I've read is that there was a desire to put, you know, very strict restrictions on the use of this airport, and that's really where what we have to talk about at some point.
So that was my follow-up question. That did sound like a plan in the paper that it was new clients. So if 28 people, or what do you have? It's gonna be 28 more
Well, we
hangars?
changed to 34.
34 new ones, so there's 28 people will come off and they'll go inside the garage, right? What's to stop another 28 people to
Yeah,
take their
a gentleman asked
tie
that
down?
question earlier.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
yeah.
Right, I mean, if I understood him correctly, that was
Yeah.
the question. If,
Yeah.
you know, we move everybody indoors, now we have a bunch of empty parking spaces outdoors, and does that
Right.
double the capacity of our parking? So that's a conversation we're gonna have.
An
and we're gonna-
intention.
Yep, I hear you.
1% a year mounts up. And
It does.
it
I
even
agree.
mounts up in a dying industry like this kind of aviation. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
It looks like this new access from Seacon Crossroad is gonna be right in front of my house too. I'm not exactly sure where it is.
Okay.
It's actually Hilda, it's in front of Hilda's house.
Oh, okay.
On the map.
But, so, I'm upset about that. There's, Seacon Crossroad has a lot more traffic now than it used to.
Mhm.
This is gonna add to it. Not really sure what my line of sight would be from, as far as seeing these hangars. That was the original proposal when they were gonna plop it right in the middle of the airport,
Right
was
here.
that it really would mar my line of sight.
Mhm.
We all know that vistas and scenery are a big part of the Berkshires, that's why people come here.
That's why people.
And maybe this isn't right in front of me anymore, but now they've decided to put an access road somewhere right in front of my house. And I would also have a concern about the lighting, cause there's a light on one of the buildings now, which is way the heck down across the
Okay.
field, and it's so bright at night, and it shines in my bedroom. If I don't have my shades
Joe, do you know what
pulled,
light that is?
I can't, it
Do you know what
wasn't
light she's
there
talking
until
about?
maybe a year
One
or
on the
so
office.
ago.
The one on the office?
You
Okay.
can, yeah.
It's massive.
Is that something we can look at?
It's pretty bright, it's the
Yeah.
past year it came up.
Okay, all right. As long as he knows which one, I'll look at it.
It's more there for
That's what
security.
concerns me
So-
too. about the light.
And, you know, I've lived in that spot, or my parents have, since 1955, and I've never had a problem with the airport. I like it, I don't mind it, I'm used to the planes, but I think I'm hearing more tonight that's upsetting me than ever
Before.
before.
Okay. Well, sorry about that. I'm not trying to do that. Go on, yes, sir.
So one of the, regarding pollution from the airport, the biggest remaining source of lead pollution is airborne lead from these old planes, nationwide. I mean, just to make the point, even from leaded gasoline in cars, lead pollution along the highways where they were driven is huge. So it would certainly make this whole thing more palatable if the
airport owners and plane owners gonna spend a couple $1,000,000 putting in these hangars if they would commit to use some of it to either convert their old planes to
Well, I think-
use.
So there's two facts that I learned about that I think are helpful.
Can I finish?
Yes, sir, sorry.
I'm almost done.
I'm sorry, I thought you were finished.
To convert their old engines so they can use the new unleaded gasoline or upgrade their planes. I mean, it costs something, but if there's enough money to do this, to get your planes indoors, seemed to me it makes some sense to take some of that money and fix the planes so we don't have that problem, because it's a real one.
Okay. Fair enough. Well, I guess my reaction to that is, as a civil engineer for the project, I can't tell my client how to spend his money, and I'm not sure as a neighbor you can either. So, climbing into his finances is a dead end. But from a planning perspective, there's a couple of things. I think by 2025, there's a law that's coming out that's talking about reductions or elimination of lead in fuel. So I think that's coming. So I think it's gonna happen. And I know that this particular airfield already is selling gas, one of only 2 in the state, right? If I read that fun fact right? Okay, so there's only a couple in the state that are selling a low lead or no lead gas. Unleaded. So they are selling it, so we're trying. I mean, I think they may be baby steps in your mind, but I think there's progress. 2025, every year as I get a little older, 5 years doesn't feel like it's that far away. Time flies. So I think it's happening. I don't think it's something we need to try to solve in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, but I think they've already taken a step in that regard, and I think it's happening. So I feel like that's a little bigger than a hangar project, telling the folks that fly in here that they have to convert, or maybe saying, well, we can't sell leaded gas. That affects the business model. If we go there, you're effectively going to kill the project, which may be your goal, honestly. So that's okay. We can disagree on that, but that's not. Well, I'm trying to find a mediated solution to this, that with some engineering and some study, that finds something that is a compromise. That's what I'm trying to do. And I know you folks have been through the ringer on this, and it sounds like you've been to 5 meetings, and there's a lot of
I think part of what
frustration.
you're hearing is that these non-engineering issues, which I know are not directly your purview, are big irritants and the source of a lot of opposition in the past. And there's some very tough issues which you've just heard about, given the location of the access road, which are in your purview. But these other things, which are not directly related, are very important to this group of people. So even if they're not in your purview, ask for what's going on. This is an important part of it.
So, I mean, certain things I can tackle, certain things I can't. You're suggesting I tackle the rebuilding of engines. I can't tackle that.
Just pass these concerns.
Yeah, no. Sarah is terrific. She keeps me straight here, and she's gonna. We're gonna have a list. I mean, understand this too. As an engineer, I often, and no offense to our attorney in the room, but I always play half attorney in these things, because all projects affect neighbors and people. And it's usually about folks being good neighbors, that a lot of these things come down to. So if it's building a fence at the end of the runway so there isn't snow, maybe having a conversation, meeting out there and saying, geez, this is a terrible spot for a driveway. You're absolutely right. I was thoughtless. I apologize. Let me move it. It's in pencil. I mean, those are conversations we should have. That's why these are in Massachusetts, and I joked about Texas. This is a public process. That's why it's a public process, so guys like me don't make mistakes on the simple stuff when I'm focused on maybe the riverfront area, which really may not be a topic that you are aware of or maybe care as much about. I'm trying to check off all the boxes on the engineering side, and as part of that, I need to check all the boxes on the human side, and I need your help to do that, because I don't live there. Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
Oh. How did it get to be, I didn't understand how it got to be from 3 hangars up to 6.
Until the gentleman showed me the newspaper article, I wasn't aware that it was 3, so I think it was, he showed me a headline. I don't know. I know that the pencil plan that we put together was based on demand. We talked about demand. I didn't go backwards, I was looking forward, so,
So
how?
what's next?
Yeah, but
What?
What's next?
What do you mean?
After this meeting, what's the next?
Oh, I'm sorry, you had a question first? Let me finish and I'll jump over that.
Me.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a number of questions. I mean, first is, who is going to ensure that the gas is not going into the ground, the chemicals aren't going into the ground? How are they gonna get a hazardous waste removal permit? When will they get it? I think they should get it before they add anything else to this airport. Who oversees the safety? The DOT does it, that's not their job, and I've been told that the FAA, they have some restrictions over this airport, some control over the airport, but not total control. My concern is, who oversees these operations to ensure that they're safe in terms of the water, the aquifer, the traffic, the keeping people out at night who don't belong there. These are what do you call them, convenient nuisances? They're attractive to people, attractive nuisance. There are a lot of issues, and also, I don't think it makes any sense to tell us, we're not expanding the runway so that we're not gonna get any more traffic. You can land.
Just not bigger planes.
Yeah, but the problem is that Pilatuses are already going in there that are louder than jets. Jets have a shorter runway need now than they used to. So to say because the runway's not getting bigger that this is not gonna mean more traffic, I don't understand the economics. And if you go for a special permit, the economics are supposed to be clear. We have a right to know about the economics. So I think there's a lot of oversight that has never been in place for this airport, and I think we're all concerned that more stuff here means somebody's gotta be responsible, and there are people only there till what, 5 o'clock at night? Who oversees this? Who makes sure that those chemicals aren't going in the ground? Who's making sure they're not going into
The only practical way to solve a question like that is to have a neighborly agreement. And that, it can be a legal document and it can have teeth, but it's ultimately, you have to have a handshake before you write it down.
But this isn't just for the neighborhood, this is for the town of Great Barrington, this is for people.
Well, there isn't a regulation for what you're suggesting. Okay, the way
That's the point, it's a commercial operation, it's not like any other business, these are planes flying overhead.
It's exactly like another business.
No,
Exactly.
it's not,
Not
I
to
mean,
the
there are
neighbors.
so many safety
From a
issues.
contamination standpoint, it's like a gas station. That's all we have
Yeah,
here.
so we got a gas station on top of the aquifer, and now you're putting more things on top of the aquifer?
What are more things on top of the aquifer? We have a federally regulated, up-to-date fuel dispensary. We have monitoring around it. So we've met all the regulations. The way this works,
For gas.
it's just like, I'm not suggesting it's right, but the way the rule is written is just like speeding. Until you spill something, and I know you don't like that answer, but it's just the nature of it. So for us to solve the question you're asking, what I'm telling you is that the regulations aren't enough for what you're telling, right? You're not satisfied that we have a double wall tank with interstitial monitoring.
I'm not talking about the gasoline in the tank. I'm talking about gasoline with planes that are going closer to the river, and what happens
The
with
plane's
all,
just leaking
with all
gasoline
those
on the ground?
maintenance-
No,
with
they
all
take it
those
out, look
maintenance
at it, and
chemicals,
dump it in the
everybody
ground.
knows, they check the gas every time before.
In the little
a pilot
vial? Yeah,
gets
where
in,
you- yeah.
And you pour it out.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
54 planes near the river, guys going like this, they're not gonna drive over to the maintenance area
No,
to check
no,
their tanks.
you're right.
So, I think what the neighborhood has come up against in the past is who's in charge of ensuring that the neighborhood is safe, that the water's safe, that, guys flying over our houses, it's safe. This would argue, if just basic economics would tell you that they gotta come up with something there to just pay for those. At $50 a month, what tie down was $50 a month, and they said in the last meeting that they were gonna charge like $75 a plane a month. It's gonna take years to pay for these. So the economics don't seem to argue that nothing else is gonna happen. And what we're seeing in this town is the slicing and dicing of permits. We come in and we ask for one thing, and then a couple months later we ask for another thing, and a couple months later we ask for another thing, and then we've got a project that bears no resemblance to the original permit. And I think this, not just this neighborhood, the whole town is a little tired of that, and I'm telling you, there is real concern about the water. I don't know why the town with no secondary source of water, they've been looking for years, would take the risk of expanding an airport that sits on top of the aquifer. It makes no sense. We all, if we wanna do anything at our house, we have to jump through hoops because we're in the, water safety
I know what you're
overlay
in. Yeah, go ahead.
protection
Yep.
area. So, you know, how is it that this kind of stuff can be built in that same area and, you know?
I mean, without getting into the details, the regulation allows it. I mean, it's that simple and that complicated at the same time. The regulation absolutely allows this with absolutely no mitigation. That same regulation that you deal with at your house, it's a percentage game. It's based on the amount of area and the percentage of impervious area on that, and there's some
Well-
80-something acres out here.
And that came from a model bylaw from the DEP.
So I'm not suggesting, I'm not trying to fight right and wrong, I'm just answering the question. And the answer is that the use is regulated exactly the same way your house is regulated, and in this case, it doesn't require any action. Now, the true source of contamination on the site, and I don't disagree with you that they checked because I've done it. But the true source is the buried tanks. You know, that's the source. That's pretty well regulated, so I feel pretty comfortable about that.
That's been replaced.
It has.
But you're still not, we've asked you, I've asked you now 3 times, what about all the maintenance materials? Where do they go when they're not used?
I haven't looked. The answer, I'm not evading your question, but I told you there's federal law and then there's state law that covers it. So I'm sure there's a cabinet, and I'm sure there's a lock cabinet and a lock building, and I'm sure there's containers that have stickers on them, and they could be slobs. I mean, that's possible. I don't know. I'll go look at it. I told you I'd go look at it. I'll put cribbing around it. I'll put a concrete floor on it. I know how to do that. I told you that, and I will. But to say that I'm going to build a garage for an airplane to park in that doesn't have a floor drain, so like, if you're going to wash a plane in there by code, you have to have a floor drain. Okay, so technically, if someone's washing in there, it's a phone call to the zoning enforcement officer, which happens to be the building inspector, and you could roll your eyes and maybe you don't like Ed, but the fact is that's who you call. You know, this is a small business owner who's trying to run a small business, and he has the same rules everyone else follows.
Yeah, and responsibilities. You know, we shouldn't have to monitor his business. We want
Absolutely.
to know that he is going to comply with the laws, that there isn't going to be hazardous material in places that there could be fire that could be devastating here. There can be vandals because there's no fencing. We don't want fencing, but you know, there are so many issues that build on this, and we never get a straight answer. And there is not this history. We all trusted Walt.
Okay.
Walt, if you called up and guys were, you know, doing barrel rolls over your house, you could call up and say, hey, Walt, how about for a little while, why don't you go down the road with that plane?
Yeah.
Because it's making my cows nervous, or it's making my chickens nervous, or making me nervous. But we don't have that kind of communication with this airport now.
Okay.
And if you go online and you wanna call, it still shows the old manager as being the manager. He hasn't been there for a long time. So who do we call if we have a problem? This is the kind of thing which is why it doesn't feel neighborly.
Okay.
There's no one to answer the phone if you've got a problem that's in charge. So that's, you know, you can understand that putting this up.
That's the gorilla in the room.
Here, it's like there is not a history here
Mhm.
of necessarily doing the right thing.
Okay.
If you go on the DOT website,
Mhm.
I can't remember exactly what it is, if you look at the number of flights, takeoffs, landings, and flights at this airport, this little airport reported, your eyes fall out. It's almost physically impossible if you had a
It's busy,
steady stream
yeah.
of landings and takeoffs. It's baloney. It doesn't inspire trust, nor, you know, I know this isn't engineering,
That's
but
okay.
we'd like to know that somebody really responsible is there monitoring this on the owner's behalf.
Okay.
The treatment of the chemicals, the flight paths, you know, making sure that the flight paths are adhered to.
Mhm.
Again, it's not engineering, but.
No, I asked you for that. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. No, I appreciate your input. I can do all the engineering in the world, and this project's not going anywhere without answering the questions. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Have you decided how many parking spots you're going to construct by those hangars yet?
There's no, I think the bigger question is if we take a bunch of planes from one side of the airport and move them to the other, what do we do with the other side of the airport? I think that's the question. There's
Well,
no,
no, but I mean, you have like, on the map, you show slots for cars. I'm just curious how many parking spots.
oh, parking spots for cars?
Parking spots for cars.
There's 6 per 5, so I got 34 spaces for cars.
And how many planes will there be?
It's one per plane.
1 per plane.
1 car per plane?
Yeah.
So what happens if, say, like an instructor comes in one car, his student comes in the second car, and then, you know,
Well,
you
know,
have
the-
like friends,
So
like
there's a
meeting, your friends come in their car, and you come in your car,
there-
and fly them all
okay,
to
so you don't
Provincetown.
build a church for Easter. It's kind of
No,
like
I
that.
understand that, but where
Okay.
will the overflow go? Like, I mean, you have to assume that, right? There has to be contingency plans of where you're gonna put
Well,
extra
you know,
cars, like
I would
there's
say that,
festivals or-
we usually build parking for the 85th percentile, that's how it's done.
Mhm.
So, you're talking about the 15% of the time, what happens. Typically, what happens is one guy will block in the other guy, someone will parallel park along the driveway. So, I don't know, this is in Cran, for crying out loud, I don't know is the answer.
Okay.
I'll get it for you. Yes, sir.
Yes, excuse me, this is a residential, R4 zoning,
R2.
and, back in 2017.
I was right, so what's R4? Okay.
There was talk to have a special permit designation of an airfield for the Walt-Colotza Airport. But there's little examination of the matter, changing its classification. It can fundamentally alter the, future of both the airport and the residential areas that extend for miles in Great Barrington.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
It wasn't pursued.
The old one, you're saying?
They never pursued the special permit.
Yeah, it was withdrawn.
Right.
Without prejudice. So there's no permit actively. We're just talking about maybe filing for one, and I'm just trying to figure out how far over my head I am, that's all.
Whatever happened, can you, because I know the airport sought a special permit for extending their deck behind their administrative
Yeah,
building.
none of that is-
Whatever happened with that?
That's
If
not
they-
part of this plan.
No, I'm just curious, did they complete that work? Did they not do it? Because I know
Well,
they
did, and then
sought
it
it
went-
a
it went
couple
to
of
appeal,
times.
didn't it?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the history.
The application was pulled.
That one was pulled too?
So that probably,
It was
so.
for ADA accessibility to
You know, I
the-
saw online that the airport is seeking to have more equipment installed. I don't know which end of the runway for, I guess, IFR flight. I saw they're waiting, I guess, to see if they'll get money for that from the state. Is that a project you plan on installing soon?
Might have to ask them about that.
Yeah, I don't know.
And then also, of course, the terminal building, right? Are you guys still hoping to move ahead with that, the new terminal?
No plans to do that.
Okay.
Doesn't mean they won't.
No, I was just curious.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't quite understand how we went from the original plan, as I said, there was an access road from Seacon Cross Road and the hangars were in the middle. Then the access was from the airport administration building. You would drive over the tarmac and you would get to the 3 hangars on the other side of the road, next to the river. And what I don't understand now was, one of the reasons they said they changed it, in addition to public, pressure, was that building a road all the way from Seacon Cross Road up to the airport would be expensive. So now I'm thinking there's 6 hangars because, number one, you need a road on that side because the other way you would be going directly across the runway in order to get to the hangars, and you would be driving your car, which would be a safety issue, I would think. So now you can only access it by car from Seacon Cross Road because of the position of the runway. Is that a possibility? Because,
You're kind of going down the design decision tree for me, and I don't.
well, it's more than just design, it's requirements. I'm just wondering if the.
I was really hoping to stay at about 15,000 feet on this plan. You're digging in on the details, and so I don't have answers. I don't know.
Are you using a flying metaphor now?
I use that on every project, so
That's where the devil is.
Okay, I agree. No, I know it is, but I'm happy to go there. I'll get right down at ground level in the weeds with you on every question. But I don't know.
Yeah, you don't have to have the answers.
I guess the fact is I was hoping to get your concerns, which is what you've been very generous sharing with me, and I appreciate it. I appreciate your time. It's late. We're done. Fair enough. One question I have before you go, if you could help me out, is I feel like we need another meeting. I feel like I need to do some homework and get you some answers. Would you folks be willing to have another meeting? How do you want me to respond to this?
I don't really understand why the owners sent an engineer to talk about things that are so beyond your ability, as you just said, to answer. I don't understand this whole process where a couple people were asked, and then you want us to tell you how to do this.
This is how I've done it on many, many projects for many, many years. I've been doing this for
Yeah,
over
but
30
the
years.
answers never came last time. I think that somebody needs to be a point man who could actually answer the
I will be
questions.
that man, but I needed to know what the questions were, and I wanted to hear it from you.
Somebody would be helpful at the next meeting to not only have you with the answers you've been able to get that are engineering answers,
Mhm.
but to have another representative of the group
Sure.
who can speak directly to these questions, which are not engineering
Fair enough.
issues, but which are important.
But we've taken copious notes. We're gonna put together and get you answers.
When you come back, it'll be very helpful, but there will be follow-up questions.
Fair enough. No, I'm not evading you. I'm just telling you that we'll do our,
It's another round.
yeah.
Who,
Would be
who
helpful
is
then.
the airport manager currently?
Joe is.
You're the airport manager now?
Do you have a survey of exactly where the 61A land begins and ends?
I have a record of it. I don't know that I have a plot of it. I haven't gone in, I haven't looked at it. I know it's on record. I know there's a deed. So I just have to look at it.
It would be
That's not
useful
hard.
to get those answers in writing, because it's hard to pick up, I'm
Okay.
not an engineer, I can't keep up with you, but I'm a good reader.
Okay. Yeah, at this point, I'm not anxious to share stuff in writing just because I'm afraid you're gonna hold me to something, and I'm not trying to make promises
Tell us
here.
the draft answers, I
Okay,
think we
fair enough.
understand the word
Okay.
draft.
Yeah, there has to be a cooperative spirit, to some degree. We don't have to agree on things necessarily. I'm not asking you for that. Let's just agree to be gentlemen neighborly about the conversation. I'll do everything I can to get it where it belongs. But some of it, I'm gonna need your help. I can propose the project, what I think is best, and I can give you some terrific reasons in my mind why they're right. That isn't gonna win this. That isn't gonna make.
Right, and maybe the airport management has to get some policy in writing
Well,
that we
you know,
have, that would be useful, I think we're
There's
talking
a couple things.
about.
There's best management practices we're talking about with the use and storage of oil and hazardous materials. Okay, I know what that is. We're talking about lighting. Maybe I just need to put a dark sky compliant light on the existing office and a motion sensor, and then maybe you don't see it out your window, and then you feel like we listened. So some of this stuff's really low hanging fruit that I think we can handle. So we'll start there, and then we'll work our way up the ladder here and see how far we can get. The driveway, I fell down on the driveway. Okay, I need to find a better spot. I need to look at the 61A. I need to understand that better. I need to know if there's an FAA rule that says I can't drive over that. I don't know so I'll find out. And when after I find out the answers, if you give me a little time, how many people do I invite? That's just 1,000 feet. My staff comes to me and says, "How far you want to go?" I'm like, "You better not go the minimum. They'll shoot me. Let's go 500 feet." It wasn't like I was being a wise guy. I was trying to do the right thing.
We're down the road. We can see the light that's on now
Yeah.
that they're mentioning. It goes right in my bedroom window, and I'm a long way from the airport. The guys fly
And
right
what's your
over our
last
house.
name, ma'am?
Fredericks. The
Fredericks?
guys fly
Okay.
right over my house.
So if
on
I put a
regular
circle that includes your house, is that far
basis.
enough?
No, because there are a lot of people who are in the flight path that ought to be here.
Okay.
Because
In Egremont too.
there are people in Egmont, there are
Okay.
people in Alford, and it's over 9,000 people draw their water from the aquifer. I would think that the town really should care about what happens on this piece of property. We can't get another aquifer.
Don't
Well, I
worry, you
understand.
won't get too many people showing up.
They won't. Why they don't care, it's astonishing. But,
Well, I just don't know. I'm kind of limited by space. I'm looking around the room here.
You'll
We'll
be
do the
fine.
best we can, but I'm not trying to exclude folks. I really value your time. If there's more questions, I'm happy to stand here and try. Go ahead.
Have you obtained any kind of position from Ed May on this latest?
We have had a very
Anything
preliminary
about it?
meeting with the town about, and they talk about how it fits under the zoning. We talked about special permit paths.
But
We
have
talked-
you spoken to Ed May
Yes.
about this specifically? Because I know the last time this came up, he specifically had his
Sarah, Ed was at the
concerns.
meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
what were his biggest concerns based on what you showed him here?
He didn't have too many questions in regards to zoning, but I think they'd made their own determination on that the structures themselves need to go forward with with the special permit.
Yes.
So Ed May was okay with it? So if I ask him, like, how did he feel, because I know last time with these same
Sure, no,
hangers,
yeah.
the same construction, he had his concerns, so.
I'm
I'd
not
be
aware of
curious
any
if he-
concerns from Ed at this point.
Okay.
You know, could that change? Certainly. He's, you know, we're a long way from a building permit, that's for sure.
Okay, wanna pick a date?
No, I don't, because I don't know how long it's gonna take me to answer your questions, and I wanna do it thoughtfully. So, it's gonna be a few weeks, okay?
And I need to know, I'm the one who organized the meeting, so you can, you know,
No, it's
throw
my
the
fault.
punch in.
Nice try.
But I picked 500 feet. If someone can give me some guidance on a better number, a better area, please let me know. Please contact me. I will invite whoever we need. We can set up the room. I'm fine with that.
I think you should put a notice in the shopper's guide, and you should contact Eileen Mooney and tell people they're having an open meeting about the airport.
Okay. Thank you.
And
Thank you.
most
That's
of the
terrific
butters
advice.
are actually in Egremont, so going to the Great Barrington Assessor isn't gonna help.
Gotcha. Okay. Appreciate you educating me.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
very
Thank you for your
much.
time.
Thank you very much.
Coming out on a rainy night in the fall here. Appreciate it.